are live at the table again. I've got no idea why I'm sounding like that. It sounds like I'm presenting a horse race. So
Maybe you are.
maybe we are. Hey, but if you're watching us live, welcome. We are Church and this is At the Table, and we are simply just four guys sitting around a wooden table, drinking coffee. We've got chocolate on the table, and what more do four guys need? Maybe a large plate of meat.
I think so.
A large plate of meat would have been good. But we're back. We've got Roger with us. Woo-hoo. Roger's here. We've got Adam. And we've got Troy McNaught.
G'day.
And we're just going to sit around and chat about stuff. And even in the intro, when you guys weren't watching us, we were just nattering and chatting. And we were just listening to a bit of Troy's story about his journey coming to faith and his whole faith journey. And I reckon it would be great just to get you, Troy, to share it, introduce yourself, share a bit about yourself and a bit about your journey in regards to God. And, yeah. How we do that, eh?
Sounds good. Thanks, Jono. Yeah. So I'm Troy. I'm married to my lovely wife, Cleo. We've got three beautiful kids. Oldest is 11, and we've got a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. We lead the music team at Church so we're very honoured, very privileged to be able to do that. By day, I'm a counsellor in a high school. By night, I'm Batman, although I probably shouldn't have told you that. Let's take that back.
It's out there now.
Oh, gosh.
So it's like if you and Batman are never in the same building at the same time. So
we aren't, but
you know.
So I wasn't supposed to actually say that here. So just forget that. Maybe edit that part out.
I did wonder that.
It's live though, so we can't.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been a Christian since I was 13. To fully understand my story, I think it's best to go back to the beginning. When I came about, when I was born, my dad was married, but my mum wasn't. And if you get what I'm saying, I came along in some interesting circumstances. So my family dynamic was always sort of a little bit confusing. My dad, who passed away when I was 18, he had been married, he'd had kids, had a family, and then much later on I came along. And so part of my story is really about my relationship with my dad and never really having the opportunity to be close to him. Through my younger years, I had a collection of, I guess, challenges. One of those was, as I mentioned, my dad wasn't a big part of my life. I didn't see him a lot. We didn't really do the normal dad-son things that I do with my kids. He didn't take me to the to sports games or take me out and do stuff. So I had this big gap in my life from the get-go. And my mum, who was an amazing lady. She's a legend. She's the most lovely person, and she's got a story of her own. But back when I came along, she was broken in her way, and alcoholism was a big part of our family. A lot of drinking around amongst my mum and her friends and other family members, and there was a lot of brokenness, I guess, within my family, just around broken relationships and different sort of things that had gone on within my family that sort of led to this, I guess, some element of dysfunction among family. So when I grew up, I just remember lacking such a sense of identity. Not kind of knowing who I was, not really feeling a sense of security in my life, and I think I grew up feeling like quite a sad young man. Around me, I looked at the people around me, and I didn't see. I saw brokenness, and I saw the challenges they were going through, and I saw a lot of drinking, and so that was kind of what I was exposed to a lot when I was younger, and I didn't know any different, but I just knew that there was this big hole in my life that I couldn't seem to fill, and I remember being really sad and quite often and not knowing as a young boy how to do anything about that. Within that, I recall always believing in God. There was just something about me. It was like I never doubted that there was a God. I remember being very young. I'm going to say maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7. I remember thinking to myself, man, I really don't want a mustache when I'm older. So I turned to my mum one day and I said, Mum, I don't want to grow a mustache. What do I do? And Mum just said, Troy, just pray to God and ask him not to give you a mustache, and that's what he'll do. And so what did I do? I went and prayed to God that he wouldn't give me a mustache. And
To be fair, this is only like in the last 12
6
months.
years growth. I've never shaved, and it's only just coming through now. No. Anyway, and I remember, things like I must have been probably 9 or 10 years old. I remember was at Fovo FM back in the day. They would give away a CD every night. They had was it the Hot 9 at night or something?
Top 9 at 9.
I think so, and you had to call in,
Yeah.
and if you were like the caller number something or other, you got a free CD. And this one night, they were giving away Backstreet Boys. And I tell you what, I have never to this day prayed so passionately, so loud to God that I would win that Backstreet Boy. I said, God, if you give me this Backstreet Boys CD, I will follow you. I will serve you. I don't know what I offer. And you know what? I did not win the Backstreet Boys CD.
I think you got off the hook.
Yeah.
Mate.
Yeah.
That might have been God protecting you, maybe.
But there was just something internally. It was just it was like, even though I didn't know who God was, I didn't know anything about him, I just kind of felt that I just knew there was a God. And there was no doubt in my mind that God existed. If anyone talked about God, it was like, yeah, sure, I believe. It wasn't until I was 13, and there was a friend of mine who had been going along to a youth group for a while, and he invited me to come along. I thought, yeah, why not? I'll give it a go. And I came along to this youth group. I remember it being an experience like I'd never had before. There were all these happy people having fun, playing things like hacky sack. That's quite a tricky game. Anyone tried to play that? That's not an easy one. But I recall when it started, there was these people, and they had instruments, and they were just singing passionately about this Jesus guy. And I was like, man, this is interesting. I think this might be the same Jesus that I had heard about in swear words and things. And I just remember in that moment, it was like I recall raising my hands and singing along with everyone else, because it was kind of like, for me, there was this connection that I made, and I didn't understand it at the time, but it was like, I kind of feel like maybe this is that God that I've been hearing about, and that I've already sort of prayed to for Backstreet Boys CDs and moustaches, and I think this is the same God. And then I recall, after the music finished, there was this guy. He stood up and he talked all about Jesus. I don't remember what he was talking about, but I recall at that time my heart beating and feeling like, wow, it was the first time I'd heard the truth of the gospel, but the first time I'd really heard about who Jesus was. And I remember the preacher asked if anyone wanted to give their life to the Lord, and I remember it felt like 20 minutes, half an hour, I was just like, oh, no, I don't think I'll do that. And for some reason, he must have known, because he just kept asking, I'll give you a bit more time. If anyone here wants to know Jesus, just raise your hand. And I think after what seemed like a very long time, I raised my hand, and it was like this moment where I just felt for the first time this feeling, which I now know to be the presence of God, but it was an overwhelming feeling that something in my life had changed when I prayed a prayer, and from that day on, as a 13-year-old, my life began to slowly change, because I gave my life to the Lord, and I just remember getting involved in the youth group and going along regularly. I just remember feeling such a place to belong, a sense of belonging that I'd never felt before. People who actually took time to talk to me and to get to know me. And for me, this was huge, because I'd never really had that in my life. Eventually, I started going along on a Sunday. I thought, this Friday youth group thing's pretty cool, but I'm going to give Sunday a go. I wasn't sure if I was able to get out of bed and get ready by 10 o'clock to be there, but somehow I did. And once again, coming along to church, I remember feeling so excited. I was like, man, I don't know what church is about, but I went, and I was like, a whole lot of the people that I saw at the youth group, they were here at the Sunday service, and there's people greeting me, and they're smiling and they're talking to me. And I said, wow, this is such a cool place to be. And so even just being part of a church for me was something that really started to change my life. Having people who believed in me and being part of a community, and I started to develop my relationship with God. I recall, for me, probably from about the age of 10, 11, I remember being bullied quite often. I went through a stage in life where I was very unhappy, and food was comfort. So I got a bit chubby, as people do, and I think for me, I got picked on a lot for that. And so I remember for many years, I was bullied, I was picked on, and I felt kind of like a bit of an outcast, and those are really tough times. And I recall being at night, I'd be in my bed, and I would just have these conversations with God. I would just talk to him about my day. I would tell him what's going on in my life, and it was kind of almost like I'm talking here to you guys right now. There was just such a natural conversation I had with God, and in those times, I just felt such a tangible presence of God's love.
That's cool, man.
And I remember after I prayed, I'd say to myself, I don't want to say amen, because if I say amen, that's the end of the prayer, and then God will leave. And I remember not saying amen after this prayer, because in my mind I thought, if I don't say amen, God's going to stay around. And it was like the sense of God's love was so powerful, because in other areas of my life, I guess I felt I lacked it. And I started to develop my own walk with God. I started to pray. I started to read the Word. I started to kind of gain an understanding of who God is, and who I am, and who God says I am in His Word. And picked up a guitar, and I had an amazing guy who offered to teach me how to play guitar. So I had a couple of lessons, and I joined the music team. And I guess I started to feel the sense of, hey, this is where I belong, and this is something I can do for the Lord. And so so that journey started about probably 14, 15 years of age. First picked up the guitar. I think during those years, even though I had a lot of challenges around bullying, and school was really tough for me, I had this church family who I was really well connected with, and I had this relationship with God that was so special to me that it got me through. It's hard to explain, but even though life was rough, I had an anchor. I had things in my life that gave me that sense of identity, that started to shift who I was as a person, and give me strength to walk through those challenging times. And one of the coolest things for me was probably, I'm going to say, sort of about 15, 16 years old. One day, my lovely Nana, who I was really close to, she came to me one day and she said, one day she decided to just go and visit a church that was around the corner to her, and she went to that church and she decided that she would become a Christian herself. And she said that she had felt inspired by seeing what God had done in my life, and thought she would go experience that for herself. And I thought, man, that was so cool. And we were able to go to her baptism. She got baptized. She would have been probably in her late 60s, in her 70s. I mean, we went along to that church and saw one there baptized, and I thought, man, what a special thing to be a part of. And my mum, I think I was, I'm going to say 15, 16, and I got baptized, and my mum came along, and she saw that, and that was kind of like, I decided I would then invite my mum just along to a church service. And it was so cool, because my mum came along, and she had a lot of challenges of her own in her life, and she had a lot of brokenness, and she struggled with alcohol and all that kind of stuff. And she came along to church, and she was so impacted by the love of God, and she, I think the first time she came along, she gave her life to the Lord. And so for many years I've had the absolute honour of having mum walk the journey with me, and I've seen God do such amazing things in her life, and she says to this day that the moment she gave her life to the Lord, her desire for drinking just left her. She just never desired it. She never relied on it anymore. And so my mum was a legend, and I'm really thankful for her. And so these were these really cool things I experienced, and they really encouraged me to see family I guess, touched, not to boast about me, but to see they saw what Jesus had been doing in my life, and it was enough for them to desire that for themselves. But I remember something that really challenged me is I sort of hit my older teenage years, sort of 16, 17, and I was very much what I would call a Sunday Christian. And what that means is when I was at church, when I was around, other Christian people, I was very much, I was kind of a Christian then. But as soon as I was back at school, you wouldn't be able to separate me from anyone else with the things I said, the things I did, the things I got up to. I sort of lived this kind of foot in each camp of like, oh yeah, when I'm at church, I'm a Christian, but when I'm not at church, I'm just like everyone else. And I felt this contention in my life. I just felt that there was something not right about that. And I remember being 17, I'd got to the end of my year 12 at school, and I decided to leave school and go on and do an apprenticeship. And I just remember feeling really challenged to decide which way I was going to go, because being lukewarm, living this kind of half foot in each camp wasn't doing it for me. And I can't remember exactly what brought me to this place, but I remember one day just really saying, Lord, I want to give you 100%. I don't want to give you half anymore. I want to give you 100%. I am all in. I remember it being a really powerful moment. It was like a decision in my life that I wasn't going to be half and half anymore. And I can say that decision changed the course of my life more than anything else up to that point.
Wow.
It was kind of like God honored that decision in my life and took me on a really incredible journey that is still going. I think deciding, Lord, I'm all in was huge for me. And I remember things just really changing for me. I remember that I put my hand up to be a youth leader at our church's youth group, and I just really got into it. I remember being a lot more passionate about music, about worship, and I just felt such an increase in the presence of God in my life, and I started to see different doors that opened for me. I started to get the sense that, hey, maybe God could use me to touch the lives of other people, of young people, and of those around me. And so that for me was a really significant change for me, where I said, God, I want to serve you. I want you to use me. I want to do this with you, Lord. And I think probably it wasn't too long after that. So I think a really significant step I took was I did a trade. I was an apprentice. Did an apprenticeship. I was really heavily involved in youth ministry. I loved working with young people, and I'd finished my trade. I was on a pretty good wage, 40 hours a week, good income, and then this opportunity came to me, and it was a really incredible opportunity to go into ministry, to do youth work. And I remember, going from deciding whether I could afford going from 40 hours down to 15, whether I could afford going from a really decent wage down to minimum wage. And on paper, it just didn't make sense. It was like, okay, Lord, how do I do this? Like, I've got a mortgage, man. Like, how am I supposed to pay the mortgage? And I remember, even though it didn't make sense in the natural, there was something about the call of God I sensed on my life. There was something about this peace that I had that I knew God was in it. And I remember taking that step and taking that opportunity, just knowing that if I stepped out, if I did what I felt the Lord was calling me to do, that he would be there, and I did. I took that opportunity, and I think for me, that stepping out in faith, those decisions that I've felt drawn to make over the years have just impacted my life so much, and I just saw the blessing of God in my life so much. Cleo and I, we just saw God's blessing, and we never wanted for anything. We never had any financial concerns, because we just lived in the freedom of just knowing God was there. I think just going back to talking about my dad, as I mentioned earlier, for many years, I never really had a close connection with my dad. about the same time when I hit 17, I decided that getting to know my dad more was something I really wanted to do, and so I thought, you know what, I'm going to sow some time into my dad. I went to start visiting a bit more, started building a bit of a relationship with him, and then he got really sick. He ended up on hospital, and things weren't looking too good for him, and he was actually in hospital for quite some time, and I'd go visit him often. I'd probably every day, every second day, I'd go and visit Dad. I'd go sit beside him, and we just had lots of chats. And I would talk to him about my faith, and I talked to him about life, and in that time, there was about 2 months he was in hospital. It was almost like that 2 months we gained everything that had been lost over the last 17 years, and I remember. Eventually, he went to a point where he wasn't going to make it. He wasn't going to pull through, and so he was in his last days. And I remember showing up beside him, and sitting with him and praying with him. And I just recall so strongly, just the peace of God. I'd never felt anything like it up until that point. And eventually, my dad passed away. And I just had such a strong sense that he had made his peace with God.
Wow.
And that he'd gone to heaven, which for me was such an amazing thing. But I also just remember saying, God, you gave me back so much of what I'd lost in the last 17 years. You gave it back to me because I was able to spend that time with my dad. And so there was sort of a bit of a healing, bit of a reconnection that happened through what was really a really sad time, that even God was in that.
Yeah.
And so something I'm fully thankful for. So I guess that's probably a bit of the backbones of my journey in my younger years. You know, God is good. He's blessed us in so many ways, and it's exciting. It's exciting to serve God. It really is.
Yeah, it's good. It's interesting that one of the things you've said, because it's come up. It's actually come up in the last few podcasts we've done, and I suppose it's just the question to be asked: why is a father figure? Why is that father figure so important in one's life? I mean, I don't know what the exact statistics are, but I know that, you know, there is a fatherless society out there, whether or not, you know, they may not have passed away, but they're just not around. And so we've got these kids being raised without dad around. Why does that, like, why does that matter, having dad and having that father figure in our lives? Does that make sense?
Well, I can't necessarily speak for everybody, but I know that in my life, there was just a real gap in my own sense of identity. It was almost like there was not having dad around didn't allow me to build myself up in who I am. It didn't give me opportunities to step out and do things that kind of built my confidence in life. It didn't have someone that was encouraging me, that was speaking life into me, or at least I didn't have a male figure doing that. And my mum was pretty cool, but from dad's side, I didn't have that. And so I suppose, you know, the dad's role. I think for myself, I want to lift my kids up. I want to encourage them. I want to build them up. I want to speak into their life. I want to strengthen them in the things that they want to do. And because I didn't have that, it was just such a big gap in my life for so many years. And it really, for me, it wasn't until some significant leaders in my life really got beside me and mentored me that I actually started to find that sense of identity, but also a sense of, I guess, but built me up my courage to live life. My ability to, I guess, to solve problems that came up. It's sort of like that lacked so much, and I think for me, maybe not having dad play that part in my life, it left a huge gap, and just not having that sense of just a grounding of I'm loved, I'm accepted, I'm known. I noticed. I had that definitely from my mum. Don't get me wrong, but I never sensed that from Dad. And it was for me. I got that from my walk with the Lord. I got that because it was almost like He filled that gap in my life. Without that, without having the love of God, the love of His Father's heart, I think I would have really struggled. I think that would have left me struggling for a lot longer if He hadn't filled that gap, and if some significant males in my life hadn't got beside me and mentored me.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too. I think one of the jobs of father is to notice the giftings and callings in a child's life, and then to call those out of the child, whether male or female, and then send that to the world. So whereas a mother will nurture a kid, and I think often and I use this analogy with a lot of people, when our kids were little, we've got this willow tree in the front yard, and this little girls were climbing up it. Susan would be there going, "Oh, you be careful." And I'll be going, "Go higher, try that other branch." So there's that call to adventure that is part of a father's role, heart, makeup, whatever you want to call that. But what it is also is noticing the giftings, callings, and who you are. And you talk, Troy, about identity. And it's really interesting to me that I think a father's role is also to shape the child's identity and affirm them in who they are. And then, like I said, to call that out of them, whether it be gifting, a job, what do you think I should do, Dad, when I leave school? What is it, what am I good at? So it's actually that speaking into that part of the psyche of the child, and then calling that out and sending that child out into the world. Whereas the mother wants to hold to and keep it safe and nurture. And both are needed and necessary. But it's interesting to me too, Troy, as you tell your story, around how that God began to fill that for you in your life. Can you tell us more about that? How did God, because I'm really interested, earlier on in your story, you talked about how as a young guy, you'd sit there having these conversations with God. Do you want to say amen? Does that mean the conversation finished? And maybe this presence, this feeling, this God essence, whatever you want to call that, that would leave. So how did God do that? Because obviously there was an identity missing, and then God did something. But around those conversations, can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I think there's probably two aspects of that, and one of them really, as I mentioned, is the the men in my life that actually kind of that believed in me, the men in my life who built a relationship and mentored me, and it was kind of like the role of godly men in the lives of young people, I think, is really important. To mentor young people is it's a privilege for us to do it, and it's so important. And I think for me, having wise people I could talk to, that I could ask questions, wise people that would that would call the things out of me that I couldn't see myself, that would call the giftings out of me that I couldn't see myself. And so that was a big part of it, and I do strongly believe that God places people in our life to guide us and to lead us and to bring words of wisdom and encouragement into us. So I absolutely thank God, and I'm thankful for those guys who did that. And shout out to Ps Jono, who was absolutely one of those people, and to this day still is, and and still loves to push me to places that I'm not necessarily comfortable going, but I kind of know, because I guess I feel like if someone believes in me to do it, then I can start believing myself. So there was that aspect. And I think another part of it for me was just as I started to get to know who God is, and I started to see His heart. When I read about Jesus and I see how He loved people, how I see that He gave His time to those who other people rejected, I start to see, well, God, if you would love those people, surely you also love me. And I guess I started to, reading the Word and just starting to read, what does the Bible say about me? What is God saying about me in this story? And really feeling a sense of, well, God, I feel like this is, the story or the situation I'm reading, this is for me too, and I can do exactly what you've called that person in the Bible to do. So it's definitely reading the Word, but I think for me as well, prayer time was just so significant for me. It was like without prayer, God just becomes an idea. He becomes words on a page. But with that with prayer and with actually seeking God, there's a touch of His presence that you cannot explain, you can't buy it, you can't formulate it. It's just something so significant. And I think in those times, particularly as a youngster going through tough times, in those times of prayer, I guess I just felt a love that I had not been able to experience any other time. So that was hugely significant for me. And I think the last thing I would say is that when I put my hand up and I said, God, I'm 100% for you. I want you to use my life for your glory. I think doors started to open. And I started to be able to step out and do things. And I think that every time I would step out and do something and I sensed that He was with me, that built me up. It built up my faith. It built up my understanding of yes, I am known by God. Yes, I'm loved by Him. Yes, I'm called by Him. And when I step out in faith, I know that He's got my back. And so just that strengthening of my own faith every time that I stepped out was another sort of avenue where I was able to gain back what I might have lost by not having that in my younger years. Yeah, so I think it was a combination of things.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the father and mother play an incredible part in a child's life. And I mean, you know, I was brought up with mum and dad in the house. I know you're different, and Adam, you are too. So, you know, I think, you know, I'm just reading Cheryl's comment there too about how, you know, you can even grow up in a family with mum and dad in the house, but still without a father figure in the house. So,
That's right.
you know, it's, you know, with the way that we have society, you gotta ask the question, the basic principles of family and the role of the family, the role of mum, the role of dad, understanding that basic principle, that role, would we see a shift in society with young people coming up?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and you work with in the schools, and you work with young people and all the time, so you'll see it.
Yeah. Definitely. So, yeah, you notice the difference between a child, because one of the things you do in any assessment with any client really is you ask around the idea of family of origin. Who's at home? Who's your cheerleaders in life? Who encourages you? Who looks after you? And you can see very quickly around that if there's an absence of father, or a father is dealing with substance abuse or struggling with addiction, or if there's violence in the home, or whatever it is in the situation that's in a negative context for the kid, that child does have issues. Or if dad isn't present, whether that's emotionally, physically, whatever. And of course, you've got to think too, poverty exists because dad is in the home and he's not able to provide, or he's just not there. So all those issues are centered around the fact that dad is not present in lives. So that becomes a big issue for the children through security issues and so forth. I think a child that grows up just knowing, not having to think about violence, not having to duck and dive, a kid who is somewhat connected to a father, a kid who is provided for and isn't hungry, who isn't worried about what's happening next week, tomorrow, and doesn't even think about that, as children shouldn't have to. When those children rise up through a family, are incredibly different to a child who has to consider and think about any of those things. So that brings a level of anxiety or fear into a child's life that isn't present usually within a child who is with family of origin, with mum and dad. And just mum and dad being together and being present in a household, it's massive to the mental well-being and I think spiritual well-being of any child growing up. You'll know the same too, Troy. You'll notice that time and time again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because it's already been a part of my own journey to grow up in a house where I didn't have that security, mum and dad. So I know what it was like for me, and I think that what I see is that the family unit is so important. It's so important in the lives of our young people, and there are lots of reasons, often reasons that are out of people's control as to why mum and dad may not be together.
Yeah.
A lot of single solo mums do an absolutely amazing
Yeah,
job,
they
and I
do.
see that all the time. And I also
100%.
see a lot of dads, solo dads, doing an amazing job. So I'm certainly not saying that it's not possible for a mum to do a great job or a dad to do a great job. But what I do see is often when the family unit is unhealthy, when there's dysfunction, when there's stuff going on, then it will absolutely impact the young people in the house. It is a shame in our current society that dads do seem to be absent a lot. And I don't know why that is. And if I was to have any message for dads, it would be give your best for your kids.
Yeah.
It would be there for them. Prioritize them because they need you. And one thing that I remember saying to myself really early on was, I don't want to be the kind of dad to my kids that I experienced. And that's not to say that I'm putting down my dad, because he had his flaws for sure, and there were some good things about him as well. But I think for me, I just I so understood the importance of my role as a dad. And one thing for me is that I often speaking to young people about what home life is like, and I'm able to have a lot of empathy and compassion because I've in some ways walked a very similar walk to them, and I think to myself, man, I want to be the best dad that I can be, and so I think maybe sometimes dads might feel like they don't need to be a big part of their kids' lives, that their kids won't miss them if they're not there, that their role is not important. It is absolutely important. And I know it's important because when I lacked it, I know how it affected me. And so keeping a healthy family and working through things and communicating and just loving your kids, listening to them, understanding what's going on in their world, because as parents, we kind of the way that our kids think is very different to us. I don't know if anyone's noticed that, but the things that our kids experience are very different to what we're experiencing in our lives, and we don't all necessarily get it. But if we take the time to listen and understand, then actually we'll solve a lot of stuff going on at home. And so, yeah, absolutely, the family unit is so important, and the role of dad, yeah, it's totally important. Yeah,
Yeah. But again, coming back to what you said, if you are growing up without that father figure, for you found that the father heart of God, or that God the Father filled that
absolutely,
that role, that place.
Yep.
And I think that's hope in itself. That the true father heart of God can fill what the natural is missing.
Natural lack.
Because like you said, the father's job is to call out. The father's job is to put in identity. The father's job is to, and you read the scriptures, which is a friend of mine just said it's just Jesus in a leather jacket. You read the Bible, and that's what the Bible does. The Bible, it calls out your identity.
Yeah, it does.
It sows in that father heart, and it's just God in a book. It's do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the hope that if someone is listening and they go, man, I don't have that, that's where the hope in him is so important, because he actually, even if you've grown up in a family that's been perfect, our identity comes from him.
That's right.
Our identity is found in him, and there's hope.
Yeah, that's right. I remember myself lacking back in the day we called it the father wound, the lack of, the deficit. And I was having this conversation with God, well, Lord, how do I, because I was freaking out about how to be a man, because at that stage of life, having our first child, how do I be a father, the whole bit. And God said to me, well, start noticing the aspects of God, the aspects of what is it? of manliness, I suppose, that you notice in other brothers and other people in your life, and just begin to adopt those things.
Yep.
So how do you feel those things? You begin to actually notice the aspects, the godly aspects of what it is to be a man in others' lives. Especially for people who haven't had that father experience. Well, practically what do? Well, you begin to notice. And actually, I like that. I like that thing that's in Adam. I like that thing that's in Troy. I like that thing that's in Ps Jono. That aspect of godliness, the aspect of what it is to be a man. And then you begin to adapt that and mould it into your own life. And also, obviously, reading the Word of God and beginning to find your own identity in your own space as well. But that's a practical thing people can do. I remember specifically at a stage of life, it's like, oh, freak out. How do I do this life? How do I be a father? Well, it's just beginning to notice those things in others' lives. So that's a practical thing people can do. But also that whole idea of identity and who you are and beginning to be very comfortable in that. Some of that is like you're saying, you had people in your life that role modelled.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they spoke into your life. And Johnny, you would have that too, and Adam as well. I know some of your stories. So, that whole idea of getting around a good culture, getting around people who can begin to speak that into, and again, pull out, notice, pull out, and then send to. And I know, Johnny, you've done that with a number of people throughout the years in ministry settings, especially the music and stuff. I mean, you did that with my daughter, I remember. It was really nice. It was really cool.
Yeah.
But again, I wonder, Adam, too, in your life, who are those people that noticed and began to call out and send to?
It was definitely the youth leaders at the youth group. So that was the part of the connection that I had there. And I don't know if I really had a feeling of God replacing a father, but I certainly did have a feeling of God, looking back now, seeing that God had put other males into that position of a father, and teaching me everything from how to paint a wall to how to tie a knot on a fishing line, how to pitch a tent, that kind of stuff.
Cool, man.
And so and you look back at those guys now, and I still catch up with them from time to time, and they don't really see what they did as being anything particularly extraordinary. But I still have a huge debt of gratitude for what they did, and one of them, I call them my adopted dad, and I was his adopted fourth son, and
Wow.
and it was just that kind of that connection. But looking back now, I can see 100% that was God giving me a father figure that I could relate to, rather than maybe not being able to relate directly to him. Yeah.
No, very cool.
And I say this to people is with young people is that's why I think youth groups are so important.
Yeah.
That's why I think youth groups are such a cool asset for any church. If a church doesn't have a youth ministry, then, honestly, they might as well just lock the door, throw the key away,
come on.
and just shut up shop.
Yeah.
I mean, the youth ministry, I know when I was young, again, coming from, family unit, being brought up in the church, it really is the youth leaders that really spoken to me and spoken to my life and really dragged me through. I know, even for you, Troy, it's like you went to school and there was those battles of you're at school, you're a one way, but at church another way. And I think every young person battles that. I know you'd go to school one day and they say, oh, what did you do on the weekend? And you're hearing everyone's story and they'd come to you and you'd say, oh, I went to church. and you try and muffle the word because you want people to know that you actually go to church because, it's my parents. But I say that the only reason I do what I'm doing now is because someone did what they did back then. And I look at that now, that the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing is that in years to come, someone can stand there and go, I'm here because Jono did what he did. Jono did what he did because someone did what they did. And I think we all have the ability to speak life, whether or not you're in full-time ministry, whether or not you work for a church, it doesn't matter what you do. We have the ability to speak life over someone.
Yeah.
And I think I think as Christians, as people, I mean, we saw Jesus do that all the time.
Yeah.
You read the scriptures; he did that all the time. He spoke life into people. He drew life out of people, and he spoke identity in, and he drew that person out. And you look at it with his disciples, the 12 people that really, I mean, let's be honest. If you wanted to put a gang of people together to change the world, you just wouldn't choose those guys.
No, that's right.
You just wouldn't choose them.
Yeah.
But he did. He did, and in that changed the world.
Absolutely.
And so we all have as adults the ability to change someone's life.
Yeah, come on.
The ability to speak in to someone's life, the ability to speak life and to draw the very best out of them, whether they're not your kids, whether or not the youth group kids, whether or not the I mean, I was that kid that was just a right royal pain in the butt at church. I know I was.
Yeah.
But there are people that just did what they did.
Yep.
And communion time would come and growing up in church, we'd have the old communion where you had they went and bought the big loaf of bread and did the big symbolic break and held the thing, we would go up after church and steal because they wouldn't actually use that bit of bread. It was just symbolic.
It's good bread.
It's good bread. You're not going to waste it. We'll eat it. I was that kid.
Yeah, sure.
And I know that I caused my youth leaders a nightmare, but they continued to see and continued to draw the best out of me. And I think that's what the church needs to do. That's what, as Christians, we need to do. When you see a child or a youth in your church, they're not just they're not just there to hang out. We have a role to do. We have a job to do. And that's why youth ministries are important. So if you're listening and you're like, well, I'm a solo parent or my kid's not connected, get them to a youth group.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I think we've all grown up in youth group. We've all grown up in youth group, and we know that the relationships you make and develop, and the fun that you have, and those activities that you do, and it's important.
Yeah,
it's important. And so find a church with a youth ministry. I'd even go as far to say if you've got family and you're looking for a church, the first thing you should be asking is, where's youth ministry?
Yeah.
What's the youth ministry doing?
Yeah.
Because that youth and children and young people are life
That's right.
in a church. And I know as a leader of a church, I always want to see young people. I want to see children. I want to see that life in church and foster that and give them opportunity to grow, and give them opportunity to express themselves. The whole sense of, one of our values at Church is the value of belonging.
Yeah.
The value of not just the value of fitting in, where fitting in, you've got to come and you've got to change who you are to fit in. That true sense of belonging, where you come as you are with everything, and you just belong, and you grow in that. And that's why, I know Troy and Cleo, you're doing an amazing job with the worship team. You see young people, they may just be able to play the G chord on guitar, and it could be the worst G chord you've ever sounded. But you just say, mate, that's the best G chord I've ever heard in my life. You're going to be awesome. And all of a sudden they start believing, and that G chord just gets better and better, and they grow and they grow and they develop. And we sow into our young people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's all I'm out.
That was good.
I'm out. That's all I've got.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
Mic
Yeah.
drop.
Jono, you're so right. I mean, I think back first to my own experience, and there are people in my life that, as you said, they spoke life into me.
Yeah.
And it certainly wasn't happening At school, it was quite the opposite. So when I came into a church setting, there were men and women who saw things in me that I just didn't see myself, and even I'd be on the music team, and I would sing something as a backing vocalist just during practice, and I would have someone compliment me, and gosh, the way that it boosted my confidence was huge, and playing the guitar when someone would point out that I did something well, it was kind of like it lifted me up, it built me up, and. By the time I hit, my later teenage years, a lot of my friends who I'd been in youth group with, they actually fell away and they started to walk a different journey. And I think the thing that kept me coming along was a big part of that was the youth leaders and the adults in my life who believed in me and who encouraged me, and I felt anchored to church because of those people in my life. And so
relationally anchored?
Oh, yeah, relationships. Yeah, huge. I mean, I think that that having meaningful relationships is so important, within church. And I think that, for us as adults, if we build meaningful relationships with young people, if we speak into their lives, because there are so many messages that our young people get that they're not good enough. I mean, anytime you open social media, and I'm not on all the TikToks and face.
You don't do TikTok?
No, I do not.
What?
I do not. I'm not cool enough. But the message that comes through all those is you don't look good enough. You don't sound good enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not strong enough. That's the message we get because we look at what is portrayed as what you need to be.
Yeah.
And we're constantly saying, well, I'm not that. So does that mean I'm not good enough? And so the message that so many young people in particular get everywhere they look is that they're not good enough.
Yeah. Look, 20 years ago, it was the magazines that was doing that, right?
Yeah.
And now it's the social media, but it's doing it in 10 times the pace.
Yeah.
And 10 times the volume in some cases too.
That's right.
But you're absolutely right. And the number of times I walk into my kids' rooms and they're watching some kind of YouTube video that they think is just lighthearted, whatever.
Yeah.
But the message they're getting is that, you're not wearing the right shoes, or you're not saying the right thing, or you don't believe the right thing, or whatever it is.
You're not the right body shape. That's horrendous for young girls coming
that's
through.
right.
Just
But so how do you compete with that as a parent? I mean, I know we've only got 6 minutes left to address that, but how do you compete with that deluge of misinformation?
I feel fortunate that my girls coming through had only dumb phones.
Right?
Seriously.
Only answer and a text.
Yeah, that was it, man. And then when they hit maybe 16, 17, the smarter phones started to come in.
Yeah.
So it was a bonus.
Maybe they had some better habits but there. But I still think the rhetorical question, or the answer to that question is, how do you deal with it? You plug them into a youth group where they are going to get that positive balance.
Exactly. Different voice.
Yeah.
And it's like lighting or casting light or watering a plant with the right stuff. Suddenly it's going to grow very, very differently.
Yeah.
And I think I know Pastor Lyle, he shared in his message, and it's an amazing analogy, but he talks about the $100 bill and a guy that was employed by the FBI to recognize a fake, a forgery. And he would recognize the forgery, and when asked, he was asked, how do you do it? How do you memorize how do you know all the wee intricacies of a forgery so you know it's a forgery? And it's interesting because what he said was, I don't focus on the forgery. I know what the real thing looks like.
Mom, that's it.
Yeah.
I know what the real thing looks like. So that's what I've focused on. So I know when a forgery comes in. I know when something's not right because I know what the real thing is. And I think that's the thing. Let's show our young people what the real thing is, and they will be able to identify themselves the fake, the forgery, the you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's how. And I love that analogy because it's so true. Instead of focusing on 100 forgeries,
That's right.
just focus on the right one,
Yep.
and then you'll recognize a forgery, a fake when it comes along. And and I just think, I mean, the church has an incredible role to play, and that's why I love the church. And I think, Yeah, I love the church. I love what we stand for. I love what we believe in, and I love the difference we can make in people's life.
Yeah.
And it's that whole thing of, I used to be the one that was a pain in the bum, but I had people around my life who looked past that and drew the best out of me. I mean, my mouth would always get me into trouble. I'd always, if I was going to get into trouble, it wasn't because of smoking. It was my mouth. my school reports, it was always, Jono talks a lot. If Jono did this, it was always my mouth. But it's interesting the fact that the very thing that got me into trouble in the past is the very thing that God is using now for good.
Yeah.
Why? Because I had people in my life who spoke life, who spoke blessing, who drew the best out. And that's our job, is to draw the very best out of people. That's our job. And through that, you've got to put up with the smart-ass comments, the smart-ass young person, the young person that's just, why you do that? Why do you do that? We have to put up with it because we sowing in life.
Absolutely.
And we sow into their identity, and we sow into their identity that can be found in God.
Absolutely.
That's good, Jono.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And really, that's loving.
Yeah.
Yep.
It doesn't sound like a masculine word, but actually it really is. Just thinking as you're talking about how, 1 Corinthians 13 talks about, after all these things are come and gone, follow after love. And in our culture, that doesn't sound like a masculine trait, but actually it is. It's a trait that sticks with. It's a trait that looks at the positive. It's a trait that looks past all the mess. And obviously that's what you're describing, and these ones in your life did very well.
Yeah.
They look past all the noise, all the behaviour, everything else, and they continue to focus in on the gifting and the calling. They continue to focus on the true identity of who you were. And they keep calling that out.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's love in action.
Yeah.
So, and again, from a masculine point of view, you have a man, a older brother doing that in one's lives. It's incredibly powerful, not to negate the aspect that women have. But I think your story, Troy, you've articulated so well, and Adam too, you've talked about those ones in your life, and Jono, you've had those ones that will continually pull that out of you. And, and times it is like that. It's a pulling out of.
Yeah.
Not always comfortable.
Yeah.
But it's a pulling out of.
Yeah, it is.
So good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
The power of words. We can never underestimate the power of the words that we speak.
Yeah. 100%.
And that's to all people.
Yeah.
It's to all people. And I think about when we look at the example of Jesus, and we look at the things he did, the things he said, he is the example of love. And he spoke life into those who others rejected. He didn't condemn those who others condemned. And I think for us, if we are able to be that example to the people around us, the people we meet on the street, the people we see in the supermarket, then we are one person at a time. We are sowing love, and we are shifting. We're sowing seeds in their lives. And I think that if Jesus gave us the example of what it is to show unconditional love to people, and I think for me, that's the kind of person I want to be.
Yeah, come on.
I would hate to think that I would go into a supermarket and say something in a rush or in a bad mood, and that person would show up to church on Sunday and say, "Isn't that guy that was rude to me?" I mean, that would be my worst nightmare. I'm about, Jesus taught us to love all people, and I think we as Christians, we need to do that, and we need to be really intentional about doing that because our words are so powerful.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, Troy. Hey, we've got to wrap it up there, but it's just been good just to chat around the table. And if you are listening to this and you are wanting a church to attend, can I recommend Church At? We have two services. We have a 10 a.m. service, and we meet in the old St. Paul's building, which is in the city there on D Street. And we also have another 10 a.m. service, and that meets in the Waikiwi at the Donovan School Hall. and so we meet there each week, and we've got youth ministry that meets. We've got different various things that happen during the week, and we'd love to see you at one of our services.
Yeah.
And if you've got any questions about anything that's been discussed tonight, you can message us at Churchat. You can email us at jono@churchat.nz. But it's been, again, Troy, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely welcome.
Roger and Adam, again, it's been awesome. And we'll just keep continuing to do this and chat around the table. Over and out from us.
Pleasure to be here.
Awesome.
Good stuff.